The cafe was silent. The only sounds were the soft clinks of mugs and the steady drip of rain outside. Jason sat alone, his hands cold against the warm cup in front of him. The message on his phone, however, was chilling. He looked at it again. There she was, his girlfriend, Lily, her smile glowing as she wrapped herself around another man. The video replayed in his mind, each second sharpening the pain. His heart raced, fists tightening, the sting of betrayal seeping into his skin. How could she? He whispered to himself. His eyes flickered to the clock. He had to confront her. But just as he stood, his phone buzzed again. It wasn't from Lily. A new message flashed on the screen. Samantha Tata. His sister. The one person who had always been there. His confidante. The one he trusted the most. "I know what you saw," the message began. Jason's breath caught. He tapped the screen, trembling. What could this be? Samantha had been the one to tell him everything about Lily. Hadn't she? Another message appeared. "It's not Lily who's the real betrayer, Jason. It's me." The world around him felt like it was collapsing. The bitter truth was sharper than the betrayal from the one he loved. Jason's hands were trembling now, not from the cold, but from the shocking confession that had just been laid out before him. His sister, Samantha, had always been the one he could rely on, the one person who had never let him down. But now, the truth was different. "It's me," her words echoed in his mind. How had he missed it all this time? What was he supposed to believe now? He had trusted Lily with everything, his heart, his life, and now his sister was the one who had betrayed him. The shame and guilt gnawed at him. How had he been so blind to her secret? With a sudden surge of anger, he stormed out of the cafe. The rain was relentless outside, soaking him instantly as he began walking aimlessly down the street. His mind raced as the city seemed to grow colder with each step. He needed to see her, confront her, demand the truth. Jason's heart still raced as he stared at his phone, the betrayal from Lily still fresh in his mind. His hands trembled slightly as he put the phone down. Every time he closed his eyes, the images from the video replayed, a haunting reminder of how deeply he had been hurt. He had trusted her. She had been the one person in his life that he thought would never betray him. And now, the woman he had given his heart to was wrapped up in someone else's arms. As anger built up in his chest, Jason knew he had to confront her. He had to know the truth, the whole truth, no matter how much it might hurt. "She owes me an explanation," he thought, the words echoing in his mind as he grabbed his coat and stormed out of the cafe. The weight of the betrayal was unbearable, but he was determined to face Lily, to hear her side of the story. The pain was already there, and the truth, whatever it was, couldn't be any worse than the agony of not knowing. Jason arrived at Lily's apartment, the familiar building looming in front of him like a fortress. The anger that had built up inside him earlier was now replaced with a cold sense of dread. He didn't know what to expect when she answered the door, whether she would try to explain herself, beg for his forgiveness, or even deny everything. But Jason wasn't sure if he was ready to hear whatever she had to say. The conversation would change everything. "I just need answers," he muttered to himself as he pressed the doorbell. Time seemed to stretch as he waited, his heartbeat thumping in his ears. When the door finally opened, Jason was met with Lily's face, her eyes wide with shock, and something else, guilt. She stood there for a moment, her lips parted as though trying to find the right words. But nothing came out. Jason's gaze locked onto hers. He opened his mouth, but his anger was so overwhelming that it left him speechless. This was it. The moment of truth. Lily finally stepped aside, allowing Jason into the apartment. The silence between them was deafening, the tension so thick it felt like the air itself was heavy with unspoken words. Jason stood by the door, his hands still clenched into fists. The apartment seemed the same. Nothing had changed, but Jason could feel the difference. The room felt colder now, emptier. Lily had sat down on the couch, her eyes avoiding his. She was waiting for him to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Finally, Jason managed to break the silence. "How long?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lily looked up at him, her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't answer right away. Jason's heart was pounding, and with every passing second, his anger was fading into something else, something worse. Hurt. "How long have you been hiding this from me?" he asked again, his voice cracking. Jason walked down the streets, rain pouring harder with each step. His mind raced, flashes of betrayal swirling in his head. Samantha, his sister, the one person he had always trusted, was the true betrayer. His heart clenched with each thought, each new wave of disbelief. What had he missed? How had he not seen it? His footsteps echoed on the wet pavement, matching the pounding in his chest. The guilt weighed on him. He couldn't shake the feeling that this had all been right in front of him the whole time. The message from Samantha, her confession, haunted him. Why hadn't he seen the signs? His sister, the one person who had promised to never hurt him, had hurt him in the most unimaginable way. Lily's betrayal had been painful, but this was on an entirely different level. He thought of confronting her, demanding answers, but would it even help? What would he say? The rain was relentless, yet it matched the turmoil inside him. With every step, Jason felt further away from the man he used to be, further from the future he had once envisioned with Lily. Jason arrived at his apartment complex, the place he had shared with Lily. The building loomed above him, dark and cold, matching the chill in his heart. He wasn't ready for what he would find, but the need for answers pushed him forward. He stormed up the stairs, his mind racing with all the possible confrontations, with all the questions he had to ask. He reached his door, his hand hovering over the knob, but he hesitated. The thought of seeing Lily again, of facing her after everything, caused a knot to form in his stomach. Could he even look her in the eye? Could he hear her side of the story? He exhaled slowly, his breath fogging up in the cool air. With a final shaky breath, he turned the knob and entered. His heart raced as he stepped inside, half expecting to find Lily there, waiting to explain everything. But the apartment was empty. The silence was deafening. He could almost hear the echo of their past laughter, their conversations, but now it was just an empty, hollow space. He felt the weight of the betrayal in every corner of the room. Jason's eyes scanned the room, his heart sinking with every step. The place felt foreign, as though it had once been filled with memories that no longer mattered. His gaze landed on the couch where he and Lily had spent so many nights talking, laughing, and planning their future. Now, that same couch felt like a betrayal, like a reminder of everything that had been stolen from him. The air in the apartment was stale, heavy with the silence that seemed to scream at him. He thought of the last time they had been together, how everything had seemed normal. But now it was clear that nothing had been what it appeared. Lily had kept secrets from him, so many of them. He turned, running his fingers along the edge of the coffee table, feeling the cool, lifeless surface. His mind raced, moving between rage and disbelief. How had he not seen it? The clues had been there, but he had been too blind to see them. Suddenly, Jason heard the sound of keys rattling in the door. His heart skipped a beat. Was it Lily? Had she come back to face him? The door creaked open, and he turned toward it, ready to confront her, to demand answers. But when the door fully opened, he didn't see Lily. Instead, it was his sister, Samantha. She stood in the doorway, her face as pale as Jason felt. Her eyes were wide with shock, as she took in the sight of Jason, standing in the middle of the room. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The tension between them was palpable, thick with unspoken words. Finally, Samantha spoke, her voice soft and almost apologetic. "Jason, I..." Her voice trailed off, and Jason's anger flared. "No," he cut her off sharply, his voice trembling. "I need to know why. Why you did this to me. To us." His words felt like daggers, and he didn't know whether he wanted answers or just to make her feel the same pain he had. Samantha stepped inside, her movements slow and cautious, like a person walking on broken glass. Jason didn't move, his eyes locked on her, filled with hurt and betrayal. She avoided his gaze, her hands fidgeting nervously at her sides. "I never wanted you to find out like this," she whispered. "I didn't know how to tell you." Her voice cracked, but Jason didn't feel any sympathy. He was consumed with the need for the truth. "Tell me everything," he demanded, his voice strained. Samantha took a deep breath, as if bracing herself for what she was about to say. "It wasn't just a fling, Jason. She paused, unable to find the right words. Jason's patience was wearing thin. "Just say it," he spat, his voice shaking with rage. Samantha's eyes filled with tears as she finally admitted the painful truth. "I've been in love with Lily for years." The room was thick with tension, each word Samantha spoke making Jason's heart feel heavier. He could barely comprehend her confession. "I've been in love with Lily for years." His mind spun as he tried to process it all. His sister, the person he had trusted most in the world, had betrayed him in the worst possible way. He didn't know how to react. Anger, confusion, and disbelief fought for control. He had always thought of Samantha as a protector, someone who would never hurt him. But now, everything had changed. His vision blurred, and for a moment, he thought he might collapse. "How could you do this to me? To both of us?" His voice shook with emotion. Samantha stepped forward, her face crumpled with guilt. "I never meant for it to happen this way," she said softly, but Jason couldn't hear her words anymore. The pain was too overwhelming. He wanted to scream, to lash out, but his voice was stuck in his throat. All he could do was stand there, a man destroyed by the lies of those he had loved. Jason couldn't tear his eyes away from Samantha, even though every part of him wanted to look away. He wanted to escape the moment, to run from the pain, but his body refused to move. "You were supposed to be my sister," he choked out. "You were the one person I could always count on." Samantha's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't say anything more. She had already said enough, and the truth was like a weight on Jason's chest, crushing him with every breath. He felt betrayed, not just by Lily, but by the person he had always believed would protect him. "How long, Samantha?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "How long have you been hiding this from me?" Samantha's silence was all the answer he needed. The weight of it all was unbearable. Jason's knees buckled, and he collapsed onto the couch, his head buried in his hands. "I don't know what to do anymore," he whispered to no one in particular. The room seemed to close in on him, the walls pressing down as the realization set in. He had lost everything. Samantha took a tentative step toward Jason, her voice trembling as she spoke again. "I never wanted to hurt you. I never thought it would go this far." Jason's head snapped up, his eyes wild with emotion. "You've destroyed me," he yelled, his voice breaking. "I've trusted you, I've loved you, and now you've torn everything apart." Samantha recoiled slightly, her hands instinctively coming up as though to protect herself from the force of Jason's words. She had never seen him so angry, so broken. "I never meant for any of this to happen," she whispered. I just couldn't stop myself." Jason stood up suddenly, his body rigid with fury. "That's not an excuse. You knew what you were doing. You knew how this would end." He paced the room, unable to stand still, the anger and betrayal seeping out of him with every step. He couldn't look at Samantha anymore, his sister, the woman who had stolen his world. Jason finally stopped pacing, his body trembling with pent-up emotion. He turned to face Samantha once again, his voice low but filled with fury. "I don't want to hear your excuses anymore. You've already broken me enough." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Samantha stood there, her face crumpled with guilt. "What do you want from me, Jason?" she whispered, her voice fragile. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." Jason shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping him. "Sorry? That's all you've got? You've ruined everything, Sam, everything." His voice cracked with the weight of the truth, the anger slowly melting into a cold emptiness. He didn't know how to go on anymore. The betrayal was too deep, the hurt too raw. Samantha's tears fell freely now, but Jason could barely register them. His mind was numb, too consumed by the loss to feel anything else. "I don't even know who you are anymore," he said, his voice hollow. Jason turned away from Samantha, his mind a whirlwind of emotions. He needed to get out, to escape the suffocating reality of the apartment. He grabbed his jacket from the chair, his movements sharp and uncoordinated. "I can't do this anymore," he muttered, the words barely escaping his lips. Samantha reached out to him, but he jerked away. "Don't touch me," he spat. He couldn't bear her touch, her presence. It felt like another betrayal. He walked toward the door, his heart pounding in his chest. "I need to get away. I need to think." He opened the door and stepped out into the hallway, the cool air hitting his face. But as the door closed behind him, he felt nothing but emptiness. The man he was before the lies, before the betrayal, was gone. There was only the hollow shell left, adrift in the storm. Jason walked the empty streets aimlessly, his mind clouded with anger and confusion. He had left the apartment, needing to escape, but the world outside felt just as empty as his heart. The streets seemed quieter than usual, the city itself reflecting his internal storm. He didn't know where to go or who to turn to. Everything he had believed in, everything he had trusted, had been shattered in one single conversation. Samantha's confession still echoed in his ears. "I've been in love with Lily. For years." His heart ached with the weight of it, and the anger refused to subside. He had always known there was something off, something hidden in the shadows, but never once had he suspected this. It felt like a betrayal of the deepest kind. The sister he had loved, protected and trusted, had destroyed him. The woman who had shared his life with him, Lily, had been more than just a lover. She had been part of his future. And now both of them were gone. Jason paused on the corner of the street, looking up at the dark sky, feeling the cold rain against his skin. The world around him was still moving, but inside he felt frozen in time, caught in the endless loop of his own grief. Jason found himself at a park, though he barely remembered how he got there. The benches were empty, the swings swaying in the wind, and the playground was eerily quiet. The park had been a place of peace for him in the past, a place where he'd come to clear his mind. Now, it only reminded him of what he had lost. He sat on one of the benches, his body hunched forward, his elbows resting on his knees. His mind kept replaying the same question over and over: why? Why had his sister, the person who should have cared for him the most, betrayed him? He had always been there for her, always protected her, but she had chosen to hurt him instead. His heart felt heavy, suffocated by the weight of the lies. How could she do this to him? How could she do this to Lily? Jason let out a shaky breath, trying to suppress the tears that threatened to spill. He was tired, physically, emotionally, and mentally exhausted. The betrayal from both his sister and his girlfriend had broken him in ways he hadn't thought possible. His whole world had been turned upside down, and he didn't know if he could ever trust anyone again. Jason sat there for what felt like hours, lost in thought, unable to move or think clearly. His phone buzzed in his pocket, but he ignored it. What was the point of talking to anyone anymore? What could anyone say to fix this? But then the phone buzzed again, more urgently this time. He fumbled for the phone, finally pulling it out of his pocket. It was a text from Lily. His heart skipped a beat. "I need to talk to you." The words seemed to burn into his screen, the betrayal flooding back in an instant. Part of him wanted to ignore it, to leave her out of his life forever, but another part of him, an aching part, wanted to hear her out. "I've got to know why," he muttered to himself. With shaking hands, he typed out a quick response, his fingers trembling as he pressed send. "Where?" he typed. There was no turning back now. Whatever came next, it would change everything. He knew that. But he had to hear it from her. He couldn't just walk away without knowing the full truth. Jason met Lily at the old cafe, the one where they had spent countless afternoons together, laughing, talking, and dreaming about their future. The nostalgia hit him hard as soon as he walked through the door. It was almost like nothing had changed. The same coffee machine hissed in the background, the same soft music played, and the same faint smell of espresso filled the air. But everything had changed. The moment he saw Lily sitting at the corner table, his heart clenched. She looked the same, beautiful, but so distant. She didn't smile when she saw him, didn't even try to make the first move. No. Instead, she just looked at him, her eyes filled with something he couldn't place. "Jason," she said, her voice low and hesitant. Jason sat down across from her, his body tense. He didn't know how to start, didn't know what to say. There were so many questions, so many things he needed to hear from her. "Why?" was the only word that escaped his lips, his voice cracked with raw emotion. Lily's eyes filled with tears as she spoke, her voice cracking. "I never wanted to hurt you, Jason. I never wanted it to go this far." Jason's heart ached at the sound of her voice, but it wasn't enough. Nothing she said could undo what had happened. "You've already hurt me," he whispered, the words escaping in a broken breath. "You both have." He stood up suddenly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. Lily reached out to him, her hand trembling. "Jason, please," she said, her voice pleading. But Jason couldn't do it anymore. He couldn't sit there and listen to her, try to justify the betrayal. "I don't know if I can forgive you," he said, his voice barely audible. "I don't even know if I want to." He turned and walked out of the cafe, the sound of his footsteps echoing in the silent room. He didn't know where he was going, but he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't stay there in the place where everything had once seemed so perfect. Jason spent the next few days in isolation, grappling with the choices he had made and the shattered trust between him and his sister. The more he thought about it, the less he understood what had happened. Every time he tried to move forward, the memories of Lily and Samantha would creep back into his mind, filling him with anger and regret. He couldn't escape the images of them together, their secret love, hidden from him for so long. The pain was suffocating. But amidst the chaos, one thing had become clear. He needed to find peace, even if it meant severing ties with the two people he once considered his world. He knew he had to let go of the anger, even if it felt impossible. The cold reality was that they had both betrayed him in ways he never thought possible. Jason didn't know what the future held, but he knew it would never be the same again. Jason finally reached out to Lily, his heart still conflicted, but the need for closure driving him. They met at a quiet cafe, the same place where everything had once begun. He could feel the weight of the past between them as soon as she sat down. She looked different, more distant, as though the connection they once had had already faded away. The conversation was difficult, filled with long silences, but Jason managed to ask the question that had been haunting him. "Why, Lily? Why did you hide everything?" She hesitated, her eyes shifting away. "I never meant to hurt you. It was never about you." But her words felt hollow, a poor attempt at justification. Jason sat in silence for a long moment, unsure of what to say. Finally he whispered, "I wish I could believe that." He couldn't even bring himself to look at her anymore. As Jason left the cafe, a heavy sense of finality washed over him. He had spoken his piece, but the closure he had hoped for didn't come. He walked through the streets aimlessly, the familiar sights around him only deepening the ache in his chest. He thought about Samantha, about everything she had done, and about the fractured relationship that remained. There was no easy path forward, no simple way to mend what had been broken. But he knew that if he wanted to move on, he would need to find a way to forgive, both her and himself. Forgiveness isn't for them, he thought. It's for me. He didn't know when he would find peace, but he had to believe it was possible. The weight of the betrayal was still there, but somehow, Jason knew that the road ahead could eventually lead him to a place where he could heal. Weeks passed, and though Jason's heart still carried the weight of betrayal, he began to find peace in the small things. Quiet mornings, the sound of rain, and moments of stillness. He started to rebuild his life, slowly letting go of the anger that had once consumed him. One evening, as he walked through the city, he received a message from Samantha. Her words were simple, but they hit him deeply. "I'm sorry, Jason. I know I hurt you, And I understand if you can't forgive me. He stared at the screen, feeling the weight of her apology. After a long pause, he typed back, I don't know if I'll ever forgive you, but I'm starting to heal. The message wasn't the resolution he had hoped for, but it was a step forward. For the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of closure. The journey of healing wasn't easy, and there were moments when Jason doubted whether he would ever truly feel whole again. But time moved forward, and with it, Jason learned to embrace the uncertainty. He reconnected with old friends, started focusing on his passions, and began building a future where he was no longer defined by the betrayals of his past. As he looked ahead, he realized that while the wounds of the past would always be there, they no longer had the power to control his life. He had learned to forgive in his own time, not for anyone else, but for himself. Jason took a deep breath, finally allowing himself to believe in the possibility of happiness again. It had been months since Jason's heartache, and yet he still found himself struggling to let go of the past. He had taken the time to heal, and his life was slowly regaining a sense of normalcy. But there were moments when his mind drifted back to Lily and Samantha. The betrayal had scarred him deeply, but in those quiet moments he realized something important. Life wasn't about the people who hurt him. It was about how he chose to move forward. He had spent too long looking back, clinging to anger, to resentment. Slowly, he started accepting that healing wasn't linear. There were setbacks, but there was also growth. Each step forward felt like a small victory. He wasn't fully healed yet, but he was closer than he had ever been. I'm going to be okay, he whispered to himself, a small sense of peace finally settling over him. One evening, Jason met with an old friend, someone who had been a constant presence in his life, even through the hardest times. Over coffee, they spoke about everything and nothing, about the past, about future hopes, and about where they were in life now. Jason realized how much he had missed these simple moments of connection. It had been so long since he felt this comfortable with someone. The past had been so overwhelming, but now he could see the importance of finding new ways to live, to laugh, and to let people back into his life. He had been so consumed by pain for so long, but as they sat there, he began to feel the first stirrings of hope. Maybe it's time to start over, he thought. Not forgetting, but learning to live again. Days later, Jason stood on the rooftop of his apartment building, looking out over the city. The view had once felt overwhelming, just like his life. But now, it felt like a symbol of all the possibilities ahead. He had spent so much time looking at the past, but now, he was beginning to look forward. The world was still full of opportunities, and though it hadn't been an easy journey, Jason had learned that every step, even the painful ones, had shaped him into who he was becoming. He no longer wanted to be defined by the betrayal and heartbreak. He wanted to build a future that was his, one not based on the mistakes of others, but on his ability to choose happiness, peace, and love. As he stood there, the wind in his hair, Jason took a deep breath, embracing the future. One morning, Jason received a message from Samantha. It was simple, and for the first time, it didn't feel like a burden. I've been thinking about you, Jason. I know things will never be the same, but I hope we can find a way to be at peace. He stared at the message for a while, processing everything that had happened. He wasn't ready to forgive her, not yet, but something inside him shifted. He didn't need to hold on to the bitterness anymore. Letting go of it wasn't about excusing her actions, but about reclaiming his own peace. Maybe someday we can talk, he typed back, knowing that healing was still a long process. But for the first time in a while, he didn't feel the anger suffocating him. He felt the possibility of moving forward. As the days passed, Jason continued his journey of self-healing, slowly rebuilding the life he once thought was shattered beyond repair. He began focusing on the small joys, reconnecting with friends, starting new projects, and taking care of himself. The scars of the past remained, but they were no longer the defining part of his story. Jason knew that the future was uncertain, but he felt ready to face whatever came next. He had learned to let go of the past, not because it didn't matter, but because it no longer had the power to control him. For the first time in years, Jason felt the warmth of hope filling his heart. He wasn't just surviving anymore, he was truly living. Months had passed, and Jason had finally reached a place of understanding. The pain from the betrayals was still there, but it no longer consumed him. Life had become about moving forward, about finding new paths, and forgiving, even when forgiveness felt impossible. Samantha's message had been the beginning, the small thread that allowed him to slowly rebuild trust in himself, and in the possibility of relationships again. Jason knew that healing wasn't a straight line, but with each day, he grew stronger. He wasn't perfect, but he was learning to accept his imperfections, letting go of the ghosts that once haunted him. "I'm okay now," he thought as he walked through the park, the familiar sounds of birds and laughter around him, a soft reminder that life continued despite the hardships. Jason met with an old friend, someone who had always been there, even during the darkest days. As they sat in a cafe, Jason realized just how much he had missed these simple, carefree moments. Talking about life, love, and everything in between, Jason felt the tension that once clung to him slowly lift. It wasn't just about moving on, it was about rediscovering joy in the little things. His friends smiled, a knowing look in their eyes. "You're doing better," they said. Jason didn't need to reply. He could feel it too. He was no longer defined by his past, and he knew that the future was full of potential. One evening, Jason stood at his balcony, gazing out at the city he once felt alienated from. The hustle and bustle of the city no longer felt overwhelming. He was ready to be a part of it again. He had worked through the pain, and while he wasn't entirely healed, he understood that healing was a journey. He had come to terms with his past, not by forgetting, but by embracing the lessons it had taught him. As the city lights flickered below, Jason felt a sense of gratitude. "I'm not the person I was before," he realized. And for the first time in a long while, he was proud of who he had become. Jason reached out to Samantha, not with expectations of reconciliation, but to acknowledge the journey they had both been through. The conversation was difficult, filled with silence, but there was a sense of understanding between them. They had both been broken, but they were both healing. Jason didn't forgive her yet, but he realized that forgiveness didn't have to come all at once. "I'm not ready," he admitted to her, but there was no anger in his voice anymore. Maybe one day. That was enough, for now. The past would always be a part of him, but it didn't have to define him. Jason had learned the true meaning of moving forward. It wasn't about erasing the past, but about finding a way to live with it, to grow from it. He didn't know what the future held, but he was no longer afraid of it. He had taken the lessons of his pain and used them to reshape his life. The betrayal from Lily and Samantha was no longer an open wound. It had become a scar, a part of his story, but not his whole story. Jason smiled, looking ahead with newfound clarity. "I'm ready," he thought, ready for whatever came next.